Well, I'm appalled that the county and the city cannot get their acts together and work cooperatively.
As the cold weather continues tonight, tension around life-saving gear for homeless people heats up. That man you just heard from is John DiLorenzo. He's the attorney behind the 2022 lawsuit against the city of Portland, arguing the city is in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act for allowing tents and tarps to block access for people with disabilities on public sidewalks. The city agreed to a settlement in 2023. Part of that agreement is that the city nor its contractors hand out tents and tarps, except in limited circumstances, such as severe weather.
There has to be a severe weather declaration in order to justify handing out tents and tarps. And the reason is because the idea is to bring people inside, not enable them to stay outside.
Now, it wasn't until yesterday at 6 p.m. that Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson declared the first cold weather state of emergency of the year. But since January 10th, the county has given outreach workers what the chair labels life-saving gear to then hand to homeless people. That gear includes, among other things, 4,220 tarps, 857 tents, 860 sleeping bags, and 4,380 blankets. Now, we know much of that ends up right back on the sidewalks of downtown Portland. DiLorenzo argues that puts the city in violation of that ADA settlement. Now, you may be thinking, why? It's not the city's fault. It's the county giving these supplies to outreach workers. Well, that's where things get sticky. Technically, according to DiLorenzo, Multnomah County is contracted by the city of Portland as part of the Intergovernmental Agreement, or IGA, between the city and the county-run Joint Office of Homeless Services. That's the group responsible for managing money meant to address the homeless crisis. The city sends around 30 million taxpayer dollars to that group each year.
Now, the city, their rejoinder is, well, those aren't the kinds of contractors we met. And my response is, well, we meant anybody you, the city, pay money to do things that's acting at cross purposes with what you're supposed to be doing.
So because the county has been handing out hundreds and thousands of tents and tarps since January 10th, before the severe weather declaration, does that potentially put the city in violation of your settlement?
It does, and it costs the taxpayers a lot of money.
To the tune of $16 million. That's roughly how much the city spends on removing many of those same tents and tarps each year. That removal system is something Mayor Keith Wilson wants to radically change. He wants to stop moving camps from street to street and get people into shelters and day centers instead. He says by this summer we should start seeing those changes. But that's not happening right now and hasn't been happening for years. Instead, the city has been stuck on this merry-go-round with the county over tent and tarp distribution.
The city is just on a treadmill cleaning up the mess that the county is leaving.
Mayor Wilson sent me the following statement today saying, "We need to change how we handle homelessness in Portland, and not just during severe winter weather. It's time to end the practice of handing out tents and tarps in Portland and redirect those funds and efforts to life-saving, cost-effective shelter." He went on, "I'll continue to regularly meet with Chair Vega-Peterson to coordinate ending unsheltered homelessness in our community. That partnership has already begun to show progress with the recent opening of 200 overnight beds." Now, I'll be honest, when I got that statement, I was surprised to hear that he wants to end the practice of handing out tents and tarps. This is the first time we're hearing Mayor Wilson take a stand that certainly appears to be in opposition to county efforts to address homelessness. A spokesperson for Multnomah County sent me the following statement, saying in part, quote, "There is agreement that as we increase shelter beds, the distribution of tents and tarps will decrease. That's why our top priority right now is increasing the number of shelter beds in our community." The Joint Office adopted a temporary tent and tarp policy for the winter months. She went on, emphasizing it was the humane decision then, and it remains the humane decision now as we navigate an ongoing weather crisis and work to increase our shelter beds. This policy will be revisited come April. Now, DiLorenzo is calling for the city to end its partnership with Multnomah County's Joint Office of Homeless Services. That almost happened last year when 3 out of the 4 city councilors at the time voted to move forward with breaking the homeless agreement with the county because they didn't know where their money was going exactly or what it was being spent on. However, that effort died when Mayor Keith Wilson won the election. The old commissioners said they would leave it up to the new council. And so far this year, Mayor Wilson directed the new council to continue the county partnership.
Well, if they divorce their partnership with the joint office, then the joint office is no longer one of their contractors, and then they're in compliance with the agreement. The other alternatives are to basically go after the county for the money that the county, through its actions, have cost the city by way of having to comply with this settlement agreement. Another option is to go ask the federal court for an order requiring the city to finance Mayor Wilson's request for indoor shelters so that people stay indoors and there's no reason to hand out tents and tarps and therefore no blockages on the sidewalks.
Mediation between DiLorenzo's team and the city of Portland begins tomorrow. The two sides will either reach an agreement on what to do or not to do moving forward, or they'll duke it out in federal court. The main point of controversy boils down to one word: contractor, and if the county, in fact, falls under that title as it relates to the city of Portland. Now, I just did a lot of talking, and we got way deep in the weeds on this whole city-county partnership and tent and tarp drama. And while it's certainly interesting, I want to make sure we don't lose sight of what this is all about. People are dying on our streets for many reasons, whether that be drugs, cold weather, or violence. A man just died this past weekend in southwest Portland due to hypothermia, according to the medical examiner. And there is no one right way to address this crisis. Tents and tarps are just a piece of a much larger issue. Just take it from these two, who I met today on the streets.
Living on the streets is hard. We don't work, we don't have no money, but we gotta survive, you know?
It always changes. I mean, you think that you know how hard it's going to be. You think that it's bad, and then it gets worse.
All right, so what are your thoughts on tent and tarp distribution? Do you see it as an always or never issue, or is there a gray area, especially when it comes to severe weather? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.